All right, now we're recording. I'm Sam, or pastor at Montevallo Presbyterian Church, and it's been my pleasure to help coordinate today's event with my colleagues at First Presbyterian Birmingham, also known as Terry Hamilton Poor, and also Leslie Ann Earls from First Presbyterian Livingston, who's here. And I thought we would just take a moment, first of all, just to go around, everybody introduce themselves, yourself to the group, and then I'll do an introduction of Dr. Goodson, and then she will have the control of the computer, and we'll plunge ahead. So, Jean and Dorothy, would you introduce yourselves?
I'm Dorothy Grimes from Montevallo Presbyterian.
I'm Jane Grimes.
Great. And Jim Shomix?
Jim Shomix, current elder at Montevallo Presbyterian.
Okay. And Mike Goodrich? Oh, I can't hear you, Mike.
Sorry.
There you go.
Mike Goodrich, First Presbyterian.
Right. Now I'm just going in the order that it appears on my screen. So if you're wondering what my order is to this. So Jay?
Hello, Jay Patton from First, also on the Little River Board with Sam.
All right, great. That would be First Birmingham. Betty?
Oh, I'm Betty Rushton, and the Public Law 92-500, How to Save Our Waters. And I go to the First Presbyterian Church downtown.
Okay. And Francis?
So I'm Francis Rushton. I am Betty Rushton's son. And what my mom did not mention is that she has a PhD in environmental sciences and it's been a career in stormwater management in the state of Florida. We're lucky to have her in Alabama now. I am the somewhat reluctant Earth Care congregation coordinator at First Presbyterian. I'd be very willing to hand over that responsibility to anybody else on the call if they'd like to take over for me. And I'm also a member of the Connections class, a Sunday school class at First Presbyterian Birmingham. And we have a number of us on the call today. We decided to skip Sunday school this morning and do this class in exchange. So.
All right. Okay. Jane? Can't hear you, Jane. No, I can't hear you yet. I'll introduce you. How about that? This is Jane Clayton, who's the clerk of session at Montevallo Presbyterian Church. And so glad to have her with us today. Ann Gray?
Gray Harvey from First Presbyterian Birmingham.
Great. Let's see, David Bryson, who we can hear but not see today.
David Bryson, I'm an elder at First Presbyterian Birmingham, and I'm also the property team chair. And we've been trying to do whatever we can to make our church building and grounds as green as possible.
Great, David. Good to have you here. Michelle?
I'm Michelle Pollock, and I'm a current member of the session too at Montevallo Presbyterian and on property team, particularly the landscaping. So interested in thoughts and ideas.
Great. Yvonne?
I'm Yvonne Gaunt from First Presbyterian Birmingham.
Great. Yvonne. Kit?
Kit McLeod from First Presbyterian, and I'm an elder and a member of the worship music and the arts team.
Great. Sure. Well, Leslie Ann, anything you would like to say?
Hello, everyone. I'm Leslie Ann Earls. I'm the interim pastor at First Presbyterian Church of Livingston.
Great. Terry?
I'm Terry Hamilton Poor, pastor at First Presbyterian Birmingham, and our congregation got its Earth Care certification shortly after I arrived due to work that had been going on for a long time before I got there. So I was really excited about getting getting to enjoy the fruits of their labor.
Okay, and we welcome Dr. Allison Upshaw.
Well, hello, everybody. I'm Dr. Allison Upshaw, and I'm a member of the Ridgeville Baptist Church in Greenville, Alabama.
Great, terrific.
Well, okay, I'm just going to say Greenville's the closest town that you can find on a map. So actually Forest Home, Alabama.
Okay. Okay. I think I got everybody. So let me introduce Dr. Goodson, who is with us today, is leading us in this. I have a little bio on her, which is rich. So I'm going to read it. Dr. Goodson is a native of Tuscaloosa. She obtained her PhD in civil engineering at the University of Alabama. 9 years experience in wastewater and stormwater quality and environmental regulation. She's worked for the state of Alabama as a public health environmentalist. She currently serves at the University of Montevallo as an adjunct professor. She has served as co-liaison for the Kudzu Coalition of West Alabama, West Alabama's Environmental and Sustainability Group. She is a member of the Green Leadership Trust, a board member of the Black Warrior River Keepers, a board member of the Cahaba River Society, and she is a board member for Conservation Alabama. So we're very fortunate to have you with us today. And I said to her, we talked earlier today, this last year, late last year, with Jessica Maudlin, who is a coordinator for our denomination's National Earth Care Ministry. And one of the things that emerged in that conversation was the need and the opportunity we might have as churches to do more work in advocacy. And lo and behold, then Dorothy Grimes was attending a conference, virtual conference, and heard you speak, Dr. Goodson, and thought you would be just the ideal person to speak to us today. So thank you for being with us, and I'm going to turn the hosting over to you. So, and give me a minute to, there we are.
All right. Thank you all so much for inviting me here today. When you were talking about Dorothy hearing me speak at the, we were at an Alabama Flow conference for CCL, I said to myself, you never know who's watching. So I'm very glad to be here to give my insight on how to become more engaged in climate action. And so I did prepare a presentation and we're gonna go over it, but I don't wanna be the one speaking the whole time. So like, if you guys wanna jump in at any time, that's fine. So I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen. Just 1 second. There we go. Okay. So when I was talking to Reverend Sam about doing this presentation, I wanted it to put it in the framework. Can you guys see?
Well,
did it stop?
Yeah, the screen share stopped.
Okay, let me try it again. I'm not sure what happened. Give me just 1 second.
There we are.
All right, let's try it again. Okay, Now let's try that again. As I was saying before, when I was talking to Reverend Sam about this event, I wanted it to kind of have a framework of what can we do as believers to impact climate change action. And when I was talking to him, he said that you all pretty much are very committed to climate action. And so I'm just going to go through the presentation, and we're just going to talk about some of the ways that we can do this, not only individually, but as a corporate body. So the title of my presentation is Christ and Climate Change, the Role of the Church in Climate Action and Social Change. I'll briefly go over myself. Reverend Sam did a really good job. My name is Dr. Kenya Goodson, and in the slides, you see me and my friend Kathy Meyer. We were at a CCL conference in DC. We are the founding members of the CCL chapter in Tuscaloosa, and I have been doing advocacy work since 2016. I was living in DC, and when I moved back to Alabama, I decided to do more engagement. And so as a result of that, I've been featured in a couple of articles on some of the work that I've been doing. And recently, I was honored as one of Black history makers of Alabama, because I was the first African-American female to get a PhD in civil engineering at the University of Alabama. So they gave me an award for that, and they recognized me for that. As Reverend Sam mentioned, these are some of the organizations that I'm a part of, and the work that I do in these organizations center around environmental education, outreach and advocacy, and environmental justice. So let's talk about climate change and why it is so important for us to get involved in making sure that we mitigate the impacts of climate change. So if you want a working definition of climate change, it is significant changes that happens to the weather around us over a long period of time due to global warming. And so global warming happens as a result of an increase of what are called greenhouse gases. And carbon dioxide is one of the main ones that we discuss, but then there's also methane that is also a greenhouse gas. And that happens from a lot of our practices around farming. And so we'll, kind of touch on that a little bit as we go through the presentation. And when you look at the pictures, you see the polar bear in the water. And what happens as a result of climate change, which is detrimental to our Earth over a long period of time, is that you have glacial warming. And so if you continue to have glacial warming, you're going to have impacts on species that are in that particular area. And so the polar bear is going to be one of the main species that are going to be impacted by that. If you look at the other pictures, you see an industry that's emitting smoke. We know that that is one of the major contributors to climate change. And then you also see flooding, and you see droughts, and all of that happens as a result of climate change. So I thought this was an interesting thing to note, because we have a lot of people who deny climate change. They say, well, it's no such thing as that. Or they may say things like, well, we know that this happens anyway, that you have changes in temperature, and that happens naturally, and that is true. You do have some increase of global temperatures that happens normally. And one of the reasons why that happens is because you have changes in the orbit of the Earth around the sun. And so sometimes that causes fluctuation in global temperatures. However, if you look at the first chart, this was from the NASA, NASA, you see that it's showing you over hundreds of thousands of years, you see the fluctuation in atmospheric carbon dioxide. And so they got this data from ice cores in the polar regions of our world or of our globe. And so you see where it just kind of fluctuates. It goes up, it goes down, it goes up, it goes down. But look what happens when you come to the end of the chart. You see a major spike that happens, and you don't see it going down. And see, that is where you have industrial revolution. And so that was the beginning of where you have the very significant increase in atmospheric carbon dioxide. And so we know that, the more carbon dioxide that we have in our atmosphere, then we're going to have more of heat as a result if it's not being taken in by plant life. At the bottom, you see a chart where it talks about the carbon emissions, and then you look at human populations and you see that there's a correlation between that spike that we were talking about in the first presentation, in the first chart. You see that spike and that exponential increase of carbon emissions, and then you also see that spike in human population as well. And that happened after the Industrial Revolution as well. And just some quick climate facts. Our average surface temperature has risen about 2 degrees Fahrenheit and 1 degree Celsius. That doesn't seem like a large number, but when you're looking at global temperatures, that's pretty significant. And what has happened as a result of that is that the ocean has absorbed most of that. And then you also have carbon dioxide that is absorbed into the ocean, which causes ocean acidification, which impacts marine life. And so that's one of the impacts that happens when you have increases of temperature. You're looking at the ocean. And so also your increased temperatures lead to drought conditions and intense rainfall events. Can somebody tell me what happens when you have more intense rain events? What do you think happens as a result?
When you have more what? I'm sorry, I didn't
intense rainfall events.
Floods.
Increased rainfall events, is that what you said?
Yes, ma'am.
Floods.
You're going to have flooding, right? And so flooding is going to impact you where you live, your house. You're going to have more pollution from erosion. Very significant impacts. And so, a lot of people have issues dealing with climate change policy and regulations and things like that. But I think as more, people understand what's happening with climate change, they're seeing that this can impact their businesses as well, and impact their, way of life. And so more people are really looking into this issue. So I just kind of wanted to, kind of bring that out. Now, talking about climate action, the role of the church. And so in the Christian faith, God calls us as believers, I'm a believer as well, to steward the earth. We are supposed to take care of the earth and make sure not only is it in the condition that it should be in, but that we also leave a good earth and leave a earth that we can live in to our children and to our children's children. And so Genesis 1:28, God gave man and woman, put them on the earth, and then he gave them dominion over the world. Okay. He started, them in the Garden of Eden, but he knew that it would be more of us and that we would have specific areas that we're supposed to take care of. So in our specific sphere of influence, it is our responsibility and our duty to take care of that particular area where we live and make sure that we're safe. Okay. Safe from the impacts of climate change. The earth does belong to God. However, he has given us stewardship over the earth. And so it is definitely our responsibility to take care of it. And then another thing that I wanted to mention that's not in the PowerPoint is that climate impacts affect people who are low income and poor more so than they do people who are not. And so God calls us to be an advocate for the least of these, people who are more negatively impacted by the things that happen, including climate change. And so us as the church, when we have the resources and other people don't, we are to be the voice for those that do not have a voice. And so today we're going to look at, how we can do that individually and how we can do that corporately. Okay, what churches are doing now, and I thought I would just use an example before we get into, actually looking at climate action. Interfaith Power and Light is an organization that was founded by the Episcopal Church. And so they do a lot of advocacy about making their church denomination aware of some of the climate issues that we have. And then they also come together and strategize on climate action, actual things that they can do for climate action. And so they have chapters all over the country, and they also have one right here in our state. And so Reverend Michael Malcolm is the founder of the Alabama Interfaith Power and Light here in our state, and he does a lot of work around climate change impacts, looking at what we can do as far as advocacy. And then he also looks at environmental justice and energy equity and climate equity. And so that was going to be very important subject to look at when you're talking about climate change. So let's talk about what we can do corporately to be involved. So Dorothy probably remembers this when we did the Alabama Flow Conference. And one of the highlights that they talked about was the 5 levers of political will. And when you're talking about political will, you're talking about how can I get my member of Congress to advocate for my particular bill of interest. And in this case, we're looking at climate change legislation, all right? And so these are the 5 levers of political will, and that each of us can play at least one part in. And so the first is lobbying your congressperson. So that would involve actually contacting the member of Congress in their particular offices. It's recommended to call them in their DC office to set up a meeting time and then actually meet with them. And so we're going to go over exactly like what you do in these different levels. So I'm just going to kind of go over them really quickly and then move on. Media relations is where you use things such as your letters to the editor, use social media and things like that to advocate for your particular climate bill of interest. Grassroots outreach, you're reaching out to the community. And grass tops, you're reaching out to influencers in your particular community in order for them to advocate for your bill. The last thing that we'll talk about when we discuss political will is the group and chapter development. And so we'll go over this a little more in detail as we move along.
Yes, I would like to see you add something like educate yourself, because I think we really need to understand better exactly what's going on.
Okay, well, this particular level, group and chapter development, that would be the particular level where you would do that. And I'll talk about
you can
why.
Also do it in your own, just your own development of yourself.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Absolutely. Like all of us have an individual duty and responsibility to be educated on what's going on. However, for my presentation, I'm looking at how people can work in groups and come together and do things corporately, because it's really more impactful and effective if you're doing it in a group. So whether you're doing it as a church, if you wanted to start a CCL chapter, I invite you to learn more about CCL. to see if that's something that you would be interested in doing in your particular city. We definitely are looking to have more chapters. And so if you are interested in that, definitely let me know at the end of the presentation. It's more impactful. So it's important for us to come together, well, to learn individually what's going on and what we need to do, and then also come together to work together to get these members of Congress to pass these bills.
Well, I think you're absolutely right. That's how I got my start, was in as being leader of several of those groups in Sarasota, Florida.
Okay, you were in Florida and you were involved in the community.
Well, different things like the Sierra Club, the League of Women Voters. The biggest one was a thing called Minnesota 88, where we wrote a whole book on what we needed to do to keep the county. And with that, we personally had members from like the Division of Environment, whatever it's called in your county, and some of your county commissioners. They would also join in and become members of those groups. And it was a 20-year effort of what we hope to accomplish in 20 years. But it's still going, and it was over in 1988.
Are you in Alabama now?
I'm in Alabama now, yes.
Because we need you.
Well, my problem is, I'm almost 92 years old, and I don't drive anymore much out of my neighborhood. So, and I don't drive at night at all. So it makes it difficult for me to do these things, but I'm behind you 100%.
Well, we can always listen to your advice and your counsel, even if you're not able to actually physically go out and do anything. There are ways that you can be a part, and it's, even if it's just listening to what you've done in your particular state, when you were doing it. I think that's important. I think you offer a very important piece of what we need to do in our particular areas. So let's talk a little more about that, because I think that's very, very important. So thank you for sharing. Are you Dr. Rush? Are you Dr. Rushton?
Yeah, I don't go by the doctor.
Okay. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
I mean, unless I'm in a situation where it's important for people to know that I'm a doctor, because I put a lot of effort into that. But
I'm the same way. I only use it when I need to.
Yeah.
Definitely. Thank you for sharing.
If some industrial CEO is walking around the room calling me doctor every other breath, I know he's going to want me to undo something.
Yes, ma'am, for sure. And you have the expertise to help them, I'm sure. All right. So do you guys recognize those people?
We do.
Yes. So these are your U.S. legislators. Okay. Now, I didn't know what other churches were going to be here other than Montevallo. So Livingston is here. Who is your U.S. representative?
So I live in Trussville, and so Palmer is mine. I don't know. I travel to Livingston, so I don't know who theirs is.
Is there anyone on the call that knows who the U.S. legislator is in Livingston? I didn't know who was going to show up today, so I wasn't able to do the research, because I wanted to, kind of touch on, who your particular persons, that are your legislators are. So I'm just going to go over the people that I have here, and I'm just going to kind of, I have my notes here, so I want to make sure that I get this correctly. Looks like someone's coming in, so let them in. So Senator Richard Shelby, and he was elected to the U.S. Senate in 1986. And I think when you're talking about advocating for policy with your legislators, it's really important to know what committees they serve on. And so Senator Shelby serves on the Committee on Rules and Administration, the Joint Committee on the Library, Committee on Appropriations, and then several other ones. And he also serves on the Committee on Environmental and Public Works. Now, from what I understand, because he serves on the Appropriations Committee, which is involved in setting aside funding for legislation, that he doesn't vote on certain things. And that is what I was told. And so what they were telling us as a strategy to talk to him about our particular climate change policy was to get him to influence. At the time, this was before the election was over. It was our kind of thing or, suggestion to influence him to talk to Senator Mitch McConnell, about our CCL policy. And so now that, we have a different administration and we have different legislators, and Mitch McConnell is no longer the Senate Majority Leader, we still are focusing on our senators. So there's been a lot of talk about talking to Senator Tuberville. And he's interesting because he's a newly elected senator. And before that, he was an Auburn football coach. And so the strategy behind, getting him to listen to what we have to say is to have, people from Auburn University to come and talk to him about, policies. Now, he serves on the Committee on Agriculture, Nutrition, and Forestry. And that's an important committee because you have a lot of farmers that are impacted by that particular committee. And farming, there's a big push for farming to take on sustainable agriculture, because there's a lot of methane gas that is emitted into the atmosphere as a result of farming. And so there's been a big push to have them to implement climate change measures and sustainable agriculture to reduce their footprint, their greenhouse gas footprint. And so last but not least, Representative Gary Palmer. He is the U.S. House Representative for District 6, and so he represents Montevallo. And he was first elected in 2014 and was reelected. Now, does anyone know Representative Palmer? Do you know him, Reverend Sam? Okay, so you've never met him. Okay. He is
I have written him, but.
Did you get a response from his office?
I did. It was not very positive.
Okay. Well, yeah, that happens. But they know
By the way,
about.
I think Terry Sewell is the representative for Livingston.
I think
I actually know Terry Sewell better than I know Gary Palmer.
Yes, we've met with, she's in my district. I'm in District 7 too. So yeah, that sounds about right. We've met with her office several times to talk about climate change and talk about our particular bill that we're advocating for. And with all of the representatives, they really want to not make waves with their constituency. So it's going to be our responsibility to whatever, bill we're trying to push, to make sure that, it's bipartisan as much as possible. Climate change is not a partisan issue. It is an everybody issue. So we have to, develop language and, around how we advocate for these bills. So I don't want to belabor the time, so I'm going to move on. So these are some of the policies that are currently being introduced to be passed. And so the one that CCL sponsors is HR 763. And when I was studying this, I didn't realize they had a Senate version of this bill. So I did put that in there. And so what the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act does is that it charges companies that extract fossil fuels out of the ground. It charges them a tax, what is considered a tax. They call it a fee. And so they increase that particular fee over a period of time. And to offset the cost from that occurring, they have the fees set aside for what is called a dividend. And so that dividend is then distributed to the public. Okay. And so that is designed to offset the cost of what would happen if you charged companies that extract fossil fuels money. And so it encourages them to look at other means of energy use, such as renewable energies, which we'll talk about a little more. And then also, not to really put a hurt to the public because of the increase due to the fees. So do you guys have any questions about that, Bill? Did that make sense? I just did the short version, a very, short and sweet version of that. Okay. So another bill is HR 7393, which is the Growing Climate Solutions Act of 2020. So that was introduced last year. And that's just to remove any kind of limitations on farmers and other companies that, do farming, and for them to get involved in the carbon market. So if they use climate actions to reduce their footprint, they can get involved in getting credits for the things that they're doing to try to implement climate smart practices. And so a lot of people are saying that this is going to be really good, to have bipartisan support. And so if you want to know more information about it, you can just Google HR 7393. HR 104 is the Thrive Act, and that's also a newer act that is in Congress, and the Senate version of that bill is 43. And basically, this is a comprehensive bill that looks at the impacts of COVID-19. It also looks at creating green jobs and reducing fossil fuels, and also investing in low income and minority communities that have been impacted by COVID-19 and that have been impacted by climate change. And they also look at job protections. So it's not just climate change this particular bill is advocating for, but it's just for the betterment of our society at large, and particularly for people who have been disenfranchised and people that are more impacted by this, by climate change. And I think Schumer was a big advocate of this particular bill. I wanted to do an honorable mention for the Green New Deal. A lot of people get really hung up about the Green New Deal, like particularly conservatives. But it's really not a bill. It's a resolution to reduce the impacts of climate change and to reduce fossil fuels. So it's not even a bill. And I have to admit that I didn't know that until I started, preparing for this presentation. Because I always say, well, what is the Green New Deal? Like, what is that? But it's really not a bill. But a lot of people are taking the resolution and they're looking at proposed legislation for using the Green New Deal principles. Okay. So let's talk about the 5 levers of political will. And so lobbying is the very first thing that we discuss. And as I mentioned, I'm pulling a great deal from CCL. And so lobbying in a nutshell is seeking to influence a politician or a public official on an issue. And that can be on the local level, that can be on the state level, and that can be also on the federal level. And so I have a couple of pictures here, and you see me there with a couple of my friends from CCL. John Northam is really the only person, and he's like to the left of me in that picture. He is a member of CCL Birmingham, and he's done a lot of leadership with that organization. And the other three people, I don't know them personally, but we all actually went to Gary Palmer's office to talk to him about HR 763. Or, it wasn't actually, no, that's not true. It wasn't 763 yet, but we were talking about the Carbon Fee and Dividend Act. We wanted that particular policy. And so we did go to his office and talk to him about it. And so what happens is, in a nutshell, is that you have what is called the liaison, who contacts the member of Congress's office to set up an appointment to meet with them. And once that appointment is set, we have what are called lobbying teams. So nobody goes in by themselves to talk to the member of Congress. You actually have a group, and everybody has a particular assignment, whether it's to take notes, to keep the time, because usually, they don't have a lot of time to meet with you. So they'll typically give you about 20 to 30 minutes. And so we have a timekeeper, we have someone who takes notes, and then we have particular people that have roles in giving information about the bill. And then we have what is called an ask. So depending on what bill you're advocating, you have an ask and you say, okay, well, would you support this particular bill? Okay. And CCL is, at this point, asking people to support HR 763. Now, if you decide to do this, you can decide to look at the legislation of choice that you think should happen, and then you advocate for whatever bill you want. Okay. But usually when you're working with CCL, you're going to, advocate for HR 763. So this is an example of a way to contact and let your member of Congress, let them know how you feel about it without actually setting up an appointment and meeting in their offices. And so this is generally what we do as a chapter. We get our members to fill out what is called a constituent letter. And so you have the Citizens Climate Lobby there, and then you're able to tell them what city and state you're from. Definitely let them know what district that you're in. So I would put, like, if you're in District 6, I would put District 6 there. If you're in District 7, you would need to put District 7 on there. And then you just tell them what you're concerned about. You're concerned about global warming. You're somewhat concerned. And then in particular, what are some of the issues you're concerned about? Are you concerned about sea level rise, crop loss, fresh waters? All of these are impacts of climate change, and any additional comments that you want. And so what we do as a chapter, for CCL, is that we get people to do these constituent letters, and then we put them in a group and we mail them to the member of Congress. Okay.
I get those through the mail, and I try to always fill them out and send them back in.
Yeah.
Even though I go then to the whoever your congressman in a whole bunch, but at least, and then I try to write a little something that shows that maybe I know what I'm talking about.
That's very important.
So at any rate, I thought everybody got those things through the mail. They really they use them to raise money for their organization, but you don't have to give, you can just fill it out.
No, ma'am, they don't. We give them out through CCL. Like, we have it with our, letterhead and everything on there. And what we try to do is maybe have like a letter writing campaign or something like that during one of the meetings. And then you can fill those letters out.
That I get through the mail, and I get quite a few of them. I'd say a couple a month.
Yes, ma'am. We don't get them in the mail. We just try to share them with our members, so that we can do it as a group, and then we mail them together.
Well, these are groups like the Sierra Club or
yes, ma'am,
Audubon or something.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. We do that as CCL members as well.
Kenya, could you speak to the difference, if you think there is one, in the effectiveness of this kind of hard copy letter writing campaign to what some of us regard as a much easier way to do things with a click? A lot of organizations just will send you a pretty well prepared set of talking points to which you can add your own personalizing comments and send it. I've often wondered how effective that is, and if there is some reason that you seem to be gravitating more toward the handwritten hard copy.
From what I understand, and this, I got this through our training, is that if the more of those constituent letters you get, the congressperson pays attention. As I mentioned earlier, if you do things in groups and you do it in large quantity of people, you're going to get that person's attention. It's going to be hard to get the attention of the member of Congress with maybe 3 or 4 letters. That's not going to really make any waves. But if you get 20 of them a week, or if you get 50 of them a month, that's something worth paying attention to. And the fact that we're in Alabama, which is a very conservative state, and there's not a very strong kind of environmental push for things, you really have to get people on board in order to get that member of Congress to really pay attention to what you're doing. Now, we're going to meet with them as CCL members because we have it kind of sketched into the schedule of the things that we do. So we have conferences every 3 months. And during that conference, we set up a meeting time with our member of Congress. So if they were to have us to come in and talk to them, which, there will be someone that is represented to talk with them, and then have those letters. Now, you can also, email them. And I was going to mention this here in the media presentation. You can also email them and tell them what your concerns are with climate change, if you wanted to do that. And then you can also, contact them on social media. And so I was going to talk a little bit about that, because the end goal is to get them to pay attention to your policy that you're wanting to get passed.
Yeah.
And CCL has been,
it's
ma'am?
always better to do things as a group. You do get a lot more attention. And not only that, you educate other people in the process.
You're getting more people involved in their own process of making things better. It's not up to 2 or 3 people to make things better for everyone. That's just not sustainable. That's just not going to work. Everyone that is being impacted, which is everybody, needs to be involved with, making our climate better, making our earth better. And so the more, the merrier. So come on in. I'm inviting you. So with the media representation, that's the second political lever that we talk about in our CCL training. And that's where you have your letters to the editor, your op-eds and your opinion pieces. And then also, developing relationships with your editorial boards. And even if you're having an event around climate change, let's just say Earth Day, right? Earth Day is April 22nd. That's a really, really good time to get people aware of what's happening with climate change. And so you may want to get in the newspaper, you want to have an event to kind of engage the community, and you want it to be in the media. You want maybe to be on the news or in the newspaper. So those are just some ways in, getting that media representation where you can talk about your particular issue and the policy that you're advocating for. Your social media is real important. Now, how many of y'all are comfortable with using social media?
Well, I never thought about using it this way, and I'm not sure I'm not sure I want my Facebook account to start filling up with people asking me to do things. So I guess I'm not going to do social media.
Okay. Well, this workshop and this presentation is to see what you would be interested in doing in particular. Like what is your particular level that you want to use to advocate for climate change policy. So I'll just move on to the next one. So this is one that I love. It's actually engaging with the community. So if you look on the pictures, you see tabling. Tabling is a very good way to have people to come up to you and to ask you about what you're talking about, and then also to recruit people to be members. And if they don't want to be members necessarily, you can give them those constituent letters to fill out, and you can also talk to them about what we do and talk to people about the bill that we're advocating for, or the bills. We could talk about other bills if people are interested in that. And one thing that CCL really pushes when you're talking about grassroots engagement is telling your personal story. So actually really getting kind of vulnerable in a sense and saying, why am I doing this work? What is it that's really motivating me to do this work? And people really are moved by that. So for example, if, for me, in April of last year, we were displaced from our home because we had a real bad storm and a tree fell on our house. And so we ended up being displaced. And so, I mean, people would listen to that. That's a very, dramatic and very heartfelt story that you can tell people. And so there's actually training for that to really be able to develop your personal story. I know that we're kind of running low on time. Sam, do I have at least 10 minutes to finish the presentation?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So definitely do look at grassroots. That's a way to get people in the community knowledgeable about what you're doing, and then also how they can be involved.
I wanted to just jump in and say, in Montevallo, we are fortunate as a community in Montevallo to have a director of sustainability, who is trying to do this grassroots engagement, with businesses, churches, and whatnot, Olivia Barone. So we've made contact with her and trying, I don't know that Birmingham or Livingston, what would be the equivalent in those communities, but I just feel very fortunate for our community that we have this person, and we can connect through her to other communities as well. So anyway, I just wanted to put that word in.
Very important.
Yeah.
That's very, very good contact person. And I'm actually going to talk about that in the next slide.
Oh.
You really was into my head. See, I like that.
Okay. All right. You're welcome.
Oh, no, you're good. I like it. This is really good. So grass tops, right? So the director of sustainability would be what you would call a grass top person, an influencer, someone that can advocate for you, that has an influence, right? So you want to gain support of these people. These are your community leaders, your influencers, and your political leaders on your state and local levels. So like your city council people, your mayors, your business leaders that are, very popular in your particular area. These are people that are considered grass top influencers. And you want to connect with them, just like Reverend Sam was saying with the Director of Sustainability, to get them to advocate for what kind of climate change that you want to see. And that can happen at the local level. It doesn't have that. If you're dealing with the director of sustainability in Montevallo, she can advocate for, climate change actions in that city, in Montevallo. Mm-hmm. So that is a really, really good thing to have. We're working in Tuscaloosa to get that. we have a ways to go with that. And that's a great way to impact your member of Congress. Now, one of the things that CCL tells us that to do is to, look at the member of Congress background and see if there's anyone who is connected to that particular member of Congress that you know, or that you know someone that knows, right? Mm-hmm. So, if they have a particular person that, wrote them a check and they're an influencer, you know what I'm saying, or someone that they work with or collaborated with in a particular area, and you know them or you have access to them, that would be a good point of contact to get them to influence that member of Congress. So business leaders, are really good because, people look at environmental issues as where you have a tree hugger and things like that. But if you can get, people who are in corporate on board with what you're trying to do, it really will help. And some of them are not going to, they're going to be slimy, but then you do have some business leaders that really do care about the environment. Okay. Now, someone mentioned, really getting down to understanding the policies and doing the research. You can do that individually. That's very important. But you can also do that as a group. And so CCL, one of the 5 levels of political will is group and chapter development. So that's getting people together that have the same, desires and passions that you do, to have them work together for these particular policy initiatives. And so groups are going to have a better chance of influencing the member of Congress than an individual. And so within CCL, we're trying to grow CCL membership in the South. And we're looking for members. We're looking for people to start chapters in a particular area. But if that's not something you're necessarily interested in, you can still get together as a group, as a church, and say, hey, we're going to meet together. We're going to have an environmental group, and we're going to meet together, and then we're going to figure out when we want to talk to this member of Congress about policy. And so you may have you may want to have a media person, people who, get the information out to the community. You may want to have a person that specifically deals with reaching out to grass top influencers to, discuss ways to advocate for your policy. And then you may have, a grassroots, person, to go and talk to them. You can do it through CCL. And CCL is very good at training you to do so, or you can do it, individually and through your ministries, your particular ministries.
So this is Francis Rush, and just to follow up on that, take a real baby step, because even the little steps that you're talking about are pretty giant for us right this second. So we have a fair representative at First Presbyterian Birmingham of our connections class, and right now we're very much involved in social justice issues, but environmental climate issues on our agenda as a topic that we might want to discuss, and talk about it within the church using the framework that you've given us right here, or in the Sunday school class, to make some recommendations to the broader church body. Might be a good way for us to get started.
Yeah, I mean, you don't have to do anything gigantic right now, because climate change is not going away. Even if it's just starting a study group and talk about, how does the church need to talk about climate change? Why, maybe have a question like, why should we care? Or, why is it important for the church to be involved? And then just have a discussion about it. Just start right there. And then once you kind of really get, an idea of why it's important and why, we're having so many concerns around climate change, then you could talk about, well, maybe we could write some letters, one day as a church group, as a study group. And then, commit to doing it once a month. So, you don't have to spend like a whole lot of time, because people have to work and do other things. But, maybe just commit that one activity a month or every other month. So, whatever works for you. And I do agree that you need to kind of sit down and talk about that. Like, what is it that you think would be a viable thing to do right now? And it doesn't have to be really big right now. Just start talking. Any other comments? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I have a question. So you've talked a lot about CCL, and I know a couple of us, at least 3 or 4 of us on this call, went to a CCL workshop pre-pandemic that was trying to connect faith leadership and business leadership. Maybe perhaps you were part of that as well. But can you say, when you think about, we've got CCL, you've got IPL, help me understand kind of what the difference is and why you would be connected to one versus the other, or is it a both and?
Well, this is what I think. This is my opinion. Don't say, well, this is bad. Some people aren't really on board with carbon fees and dividends, right? Some people are not necessarily, on board with that. I'm not saying that's what IPL is, but I do think that some people have different things that they would like to see in climate change policies. So CCL really focuses on the business aspect of it. Some more grassroots organizations, they may want to do something different. So I was mentioning the Thrive Act. The Thrive Act is, fundamentally different than the, Carbon Fee and Dividend Act. Because Thrive is looking more at the systemic racism issues that are occurring. It's looking more into legislation and regulations, which, some conservatives don't like. They don't like a whole lot of regulations. But I think that there's a place for regulations. I think there's a place for, maybe talking about, ways to, have a business model around this. It's just people have different ways of wanting to approach the situation. And so I think, IPL may have a very different approach than CCL. And I can't speak for IPL because I don't want to do that because I'm not a member. But I do think that it's probably different than what CCL is doing. Does that make sense? Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I guess so. It doesn't answer the question
Yeah, they have, I think it's different approaches. And like I said, this is just an opinion. I did go to their website and kind of look over what they're doing. So I know that they are for climate change advocacy. I'm just not really sure if it's really around anything like a dividend or anything like that. It's probably more grassroots oriented. I know Reverend Malcolm. I've met him, and he's very, very much into the more grassroots side of things, not necessarily on the business model side, and more on the social justice side. Anybody else? Okay. All right. So as I mentioned, when I was giving Dorothy the blurb for your newsletter, I thought it would be important to talk about what you can do on the state level and the local levels, as well as, working with federal policies. And so I thought I would put in a couple of slides about that. And so in Alabama, there, a lot of progressive environmentalists are really pushing for renewable energy in our state, solar energy in particular, right? And so there's a lot of pushback from that, a lot of pushback from that. But you all, as the constituents of our state, have a voice and have a say as far as what kind of energy sources you want to have in our state. And so right now, Alabama is one of the only states that have what is called a solar charge. So they charge you to actually use solar energy in our state. And I don't think any other state does that. And so, that's really an issue. The cost, to be able to use solar energy in our state. And it's not been something that has been really advocated for with our public utilities. And so the Alabama Public Service Commission, they determine the rates for our public utilities, particularly for our electric, public utilities. However, they also have a say in the types of energy that these public utilities should be using. And I think that we as a community should be able to go to the Alabama Public Service Commission to advocate for solar energy in our state. And so let me tell y'all something. I'm gonna try not to get in trouble, okay? They're having a meeting next week, and I don't know if anybody knew about it. They have a meeting. It's going to be a virtual meeting on March 2nd. I put on there a screenshot. They're having a March commission meeting notice. So they're meeting on the 2nd, and it's going to be live streamed. So what I said I was going to do is to make it a point for people to know that they are having a meeting on next week, which is for us in Tuscaloosa is the election day. So we are actually, voting for our mayor and our city council on Tuesday. So for them to have it like on that day, I was just like, really? You're having it on a Tuesday and nobody knows about it. So I'm gonna make that. I could send you the links, Dr. Reverend Sam. I could send you that. I could send you that information. And so we have a right to advocate for solar energy in our state. So that would be a way for people to advocate on the state level. And I do actually have the website there, but I'll send you the link so you can actually have access to it. And so this is going to be I think this is my last slide. And so not only do you have the right to advocate for climate change policy on the federal level and the state, but also your local level. And so I put down here this initiative that they have for climate mayors. And that's just talking to your mayor and your city council and seeing what their stance is on climate change policies and making things better for people and to reduce the impacts of climate change. And so they have this, I guess kind of pledge. So if your mayor is for it, they can join a group of mayors that are, really making a commitment to climate policy in their particular cities. And that happened as a result of us being taken out of the Paris Accord. Okay, so mayors got together and said, hey, we're going to do it for our cities if they don't do it nationally. And so, internationally. And so that's where that, or nationally, yeah, and that's where that comes from. Okay, and so I put the link there. I'll send Reverend Sam all of this. And then I wanted to do a little shout out to Tuscaloosa Action, which was started by my good friend Mike Altman and his wife Emily. I don't know if you guys know them, but they are really getting us engaged in doing progressive policies in our city. And so one of the things that we did was we gave each of the mayoral candidates, since all of them are running for office, we gave them a couple, like 6 questions to answer and for them to, tell what their stance on was for this particular policy. And one of the things that we had on there was climate actions. And so we graded them and we, made it public on what their stances were, and that was including climate change. And I was going to post the report card, but I decided I'm not going to be mean today. I'm gonna be a good godly lady and be nice. We got some work to do on our local levels with climate action. I'll just say that. Okay. So those are just some ways, but it doesn't have to be anything really major to really, be an advocate for, climate advocacy. So with that, I probably went over my hour. If you guys are interested in CCL, let me know. I've never helped anyone start a chapter. So I'll probably call, my good friend John in Birmingham, because they helped us get established here. And so this concludes my talk. Any thoughts? Any ideas? Any feelings?
I was just,
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
I just wanted to ask a quick follow-up question about what you were saying about the state. I recall several years back, I'm going to guess 5, 6, maybe 10 years back, getting a letter from Alabama Power with this wonderful invitation to get so much of my energy, my electricity from alternative sources. And it was for, it's just like inviting me to pay this amount of money to do that. Well, it just about sent me through the ceiling. So I wrote a very forthright letter to Alabama Power, letting them know how absurd I thought that was. And then I called, I don't remember which environmental organization it was, and asked if anybody was aware of what was going on with Alabama Power. And they referred me at the time to the Alabama Conservancy, which is not the Conservancy anymore. I can't remember what the name of it has changed to. But I did have a fairly long conversation with that organization. And the reason I was referred to them is they said that they were the only organization in the state that they knew that had really worked on energy. And my question is, are there any, do you know of any environmental organizations in the state who have taken on Alabama Power about that?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. GASP. You Birmingham people know about GASP, right? They are the leading advocates for implementing solar energy in our state. I know the person that's the executive director of GASP. His name is, I don't know why I'm getting a blank, Michael Hansen. You probably remember Michael because he ran for Senate. He ran for U.S. Senate some years ago. He was on the primary. He ran, when Doug Jones was doing the primary, he was on there for the primary too. But Michael is a wonderful, wonderful advocate, and he would be a good person to talk to, particularly about the Alabama Public Service Commission. There's a couple of organizations that are working to get solar power, affordable solar power in our state. If you gave me a couple of days, I could send you all of their names and contact information. And I'll send it to Sam too.
Yeah, send it to me and I will then forward it to everyone. Okay.
If you give me a couple of days, I'll do that for you. I don't mind. I know a lot of people that are doing advocacy work in our state around in the environment, and in particular solar. And Reverend Malcolm is a really good person to talk to because he does a lot of advocacy around that too. But the idea is to get rid of, but not get rid of, I don't say it like that, but to start using renewable energy. There's a lot of talk about the coal ash issues, and I always say when people talk about coal ash, I'm like, eliminate the source and you don't have a coal ash issue. Yep. If you're using, I'm sorry, I didn't want to interrupt anyone. If you're using solar energy, you're not going to have coal ash. It's simple, but people don't want to make the changes. They want to keep things the way that it is. And it's up to us as the community to say, look, we want to see some changes in our state. It's just really going to be up to us.
Well, let me jump in, Dr. Goodson, and just say, we're about 3:15. Some folks may have to leave and others can linger a little bit longer, but I appreciate what you've done and the information you promised to send, and I can send that out then to Terry and Leslie and others, about these things. But for me, I'm just speaking for myself. I think you've given me that our Earth Care team can talk about at our church about the things to focus on, to advocate for both, the HR 763, the other things you talked about, but also in the state I think it's particularly important that we focus on the solar energy development. And then we also have our connections with our local, like I already mentioned, Olivia Barone, and supporting her and connecting with her. So I'm grateful to you for this information today that you've given us.
Second Sam's comment. I think this has been very helpful. It does give me some direction. Here's some things I might want to do. And I can tell you, we just did a house renovation not too long ago and got talked out of solar panels here in Alabama because it would cost us too much to install them.
Right.
They're expensive at this particular juncture. Is expensive, and you're going to be charged to use it. Solar energy is supposed to reduce your costs because you're using renewable energy, right? It's unlimited.
And I also got to be just innovative about where we put them, because too many times they want to go out to some pristine natural area and cover it with solar panels. And no, we need to put them on rooftops. And I'm hoping somebody will finally invent roof tiles that you can put on your roof to look more like tiles. And I think a lot of things, are going to change. But please don't go out and take down a beautiful natural area and put solar panels on it.
Right. I'm with you on that.
In Florida.
I'm going to recommend we clad the entire state house with solar panels.
Yeah, that would be nice. I've got a question, Dr. Goodson. And I'm a big believer in natural areas, Dr. Rushton. And I would be called a tree hugger, and I don't know if you can see, but that's all that's around me.
It's beautiful out there.
And so solar panels are not a viable option at my house. I have so much shade that I can't have a vegetable garden, or very many really flowering gardens other than camellias and things like that. So, I mean, how do you respond to that? I don't want people carving down the forests around their homes to put solar panels in. I mean, these neighborhoods with no trees look horrible, and they're not conducive to, they're just not friendly for being outside.
I think I don't really have the answer, but I would think that, I know that we don't want community solar where, you like, the good doctor said, where you're just taking an area that's, pristine and tearing it up. But, some kind of way have some kind of measures where you can have community solar and it's not, necessarily, causing, any issues with, the environment or, tearing down a particular area just to put a bunch of panels up.
It was interesting years ago. Alabama Power in Montevallo had a building. It's now part of the university, but they built it to be solar. It was supposed to be a demo of solar energy, and it was actually, and one of my friends, Terry Arnold, Dorothy, do you remember this, Grimes? And he said it was the way it was built was to prove that solar energy was inefficient and wouldn't work. This was back in the 70s, and it's a very ugly building. So that's the UMON building, Sam. That's the UMON building.
Okay.
And they built it to prove it was inefficient.
Right. Yeah. Yep. To fail.
We got a lot of work to do, y'all.
Terry Arnold, he would go crazy. And he's an engineer, it's not somebody that's not educated. So it's just interesting. So, it's very interesting. Thank you.
I'm going to look more into that community solar because I've heard a lot of talk about it because they say it's less expensive than having the solar panels on the top of your roof, to have community solar. But, as the good doctor mentioned, you don't want to just have them like out in this, area that you're tearing up just to put the solar panels there. Mm-hmm. It has to be another way to do it.
Yeah. Yeah, because we're certainly trying to protect our pristine areas, but have not.
Yeah, you don't want a big solar panel,
Yeah.
you know, in nature or anything like
Yeah,
that.
you don't want it out at Show Creek Park, y'all.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, let me ask if I can jump in again, if there's any other comment or question that we haven't covered, that Dr. Goodson hasn't heard yet that we want to hear.
I was wondering if we could get the PowerPoint presentation that you shared with us.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. I should be able to provide it. Let me talk to Reverend Sam first, and then I'll get back to you, Leslie. Is that okay?
Sure, or just the text of it so that we
Okay.
have notes on it. That would be great.
Okay. Okay. I may just give like a portion of it. If that's okay. The port. Yeah. Okay.
I'd like your first slide.
Okay.
Charts. I'd like your charts.
You like that? Okay. I'm glad.
That's awesome. That was
I'm
awesome.
glad. I'm glad.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Thank you guys so much. I really enjoyed this. I enjoyed Dr. Betty too. Is she gone?
Yeah, Betty and
Okay.
Francis are gone. Yes, right. So.
Okay. Okay. All right. Well, I really enjoyed this.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much. So, everyone, let's say thank you, Dr. Goodson. Thank you so much. And I've asked Terry if she would close this with prayer today. So
Let's pray. Creating God, your voice called forth all that is. May we use our voices to protect all that is. May we speak with loving truth. May we be determined. May we not be silenced. May we help to lead toward a more generative future for every creature and every person, so that we might continue to enjoy the beauty and the abundance of your creation. We ask all of this in your holy name. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you,
Thanks
everyone,
for putting
coming
this
today.
together, Sam.
Sure.
I'm logging off right now, Reverend Sam.
Okay. All
Bye,
right.
everybody.
All right.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Dr. Upshaw.